Hey, what's up, seventh grade? Hope everybody's doing well out there. I miss our class. I'm sorry that we won't be having our Teams call this week as originally scheduled, but I have created the screencast for you to walk you through our Canvas module, to introduce the Renaissance to you, and kind of set us up for our Teams call, which will take place next Thursday when we will have our first synchronous learning activity. Whenever we start our Teams calls, this screen will be up on display for you, so just showing that to you for consistency's sake. The agenda of this screencast, I'm going to start with the main idea. I'll move to our essential question, give you a brief timeline of European history. We'll then introduce the Renaissance to you, and then I will show you what the module looks like that you're going to be doing for your asynchronous or independent learning. We are going to move from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. The Renaissance will take place approximately over a span of 300 years between 1300 and 1600 in the Common Era, and it's the rebirth of societies around the world. The main idea, and really what we are going to start to talk about over the course of the next 4 or 5 class periods that we have together, is that the Renaissance was a flowering of art and learning that was inspired by a rediscovery of the classical cultures of Greece and Rome. It began in Italy around 1300 and spread throughout Europe, lasting until the early 1600s. So really during the Renaissance, it's rooted in some of the societies and civilizations that we talked about earlier this year with Greece and Rome, rooted in classical, but it also sees new art, new learning, travel and commerce, the growth of city-states, and this new school of thought or idea that becomes known as humanism. So really our essential question is, what changes in Europe led to the Renaissance? How do we go from, feudalism and the Middle Ages to this rebirth of society where there's just this flourishing of art and culture and thinking and exploration and trade, which really sets the world up for some of the stuff you'll be learning about in 8th and ninth grade. And if you kind of look at a timeline of this, you have the classical period. These were our Greek and our Roman civilizations. Those were going to take place, before Common Era. They also span to the Common Era. Then we have the medieval period. Sometimes we call that the Middle or the Dark Ages. It begins with the fall of Rome. It goes to about 1300 in the Common Era. And then we have the Renaissance. This is the rebirth and interest in classical ideas, which ends the Dark Ages and brings us up to the modern world that we are at today. There are a couple of very key events in Renaissance history. We start to see central banking systems in Italy with the Medici Bank. We have the publishing of books. Johann Gutenberg develops the printing press. That will lead to an explosion of learning across the continent of Europe and eventually around the world. Christopher Columbus will explore, as will a bunch of other explorers. We'll be talking about them later on. And then there are incredibly important works of art, Michelangelo's David. And then when we get to 1570, we have publishing of atlases. We talked about maps in the beginning of our time together this year. So really, really important stuff happening here during the Renaissance era. So what was the Renaissance? What is this time period that we're going to be learning about? The French use the word Renaissance because it means rebirth. And for Europe, we're really talking about the rebirth of classical art and learning. A lot of this that didn't take place during the Middle Ages or the medieval time period will now kind of be reborn in Europe from 1300 to about 1600 in the Common Era. As the Middle Ages ended, the Renaissance will change many aspects of daily life. You see that the Renaissance is very different from the sort of feudal societies that were in existence for hundreds of years during the Middle Ages. So what do we see during the Renaissance? Well, the first thing I think that we see is we see a decline of feudalism. I think you no longer have this caste and class system like you did in the Middle Ages. And I think that's a really important change, because that will lead to all of these other things. Travel and commerce, people start to move around a lot more. You also see an increase in business, which is good for economics of these city-states and eventually becoming nation-states. We have art, some of the most incredible artists and artistic works are going to come out of this time period, and we'll explore what some of those are in some of our future lessons. There's learning. There's a lot of learning that's taking place. there's writing, there's plays that are being written, William Shakespeare. There's inventions. The inventions of this time period are very, very important and relevant. Again, I mentioned Johann Gutenberg and the printing press. We'll also have a lot of other inventors that will create new works that make life easier. We also see the growth of cities. This is when cities really um, start to form, emerge, and then that will set us up for the industrial era that we will see starting in the 1600s and into 1700s in parts of Europe. So, just out of curiosity, and maybe think about this: which of these would you be the most interested in learning about? I will be asking you in our next lesson to think about that so that you can kind of give me some feedback for where we should be focusing some of our time and effort on the Renaissance. The growth of trade and commerce is an incredibly important one because trade brought new ideas as well as goods into Europe. You have this bustling economy that's going to create prosperous cities. Here's an image of Venice in Italy, which is going to be one of those cities that is formed during the Renaissance time period. You have new classes of people. These new classes of people had more money than ever before. In feudalism, people didn't have a lot. Now people are starting to emerge as new classes in society, fulfilling different jobs, earning money for those jobs, and then having that money to spend. Wealth is good. Wealth will lead to a support for the arts and the learning. When people have wealth, they're willing to help others learn. And that's where you also see sort of this blossoming of the arts and culture and learning during the Renaissance. And again, this is such a major change from the Middle or the Dark Ages. So this is what we're going to be working on. This is an introduction to the Renaissance. We'll have another more in-depth lesson for the Renaissance when we come back together for our class next Thursday. So your asynchronous learning, your independent learning, is going to be posted in the form of a module. And I'm going to ask that you complete this before next Thursday. I will be adding, or I'm sorry, before the 17th of April, or by the 17th of April. I'll be adding that to our OneNote calendar. It's a Europe mapping activity. It's actually a digital mapping activity through TCI. And the influence of Italian city-states. There's a humanism discussion, and then there's also a processing activity. So let me show you what this is going to look like from your student view. So if you go to your dashboard and then you click on our class, once you are in our class, the second link is for modules. Click on the modules link. And then it'll be right here. It says the Renaissance. The Renaissance Introduction and Directions. I'm going to always structure my modules in a very similar way. I think it's important for you to have consistency. So whenever I post a module, it'll be similar to the format that you're going to see here. Start with the directions. All right, you're obviously watching this video overview. You'll complete the mapping activity. You'll read about the influence of Italian city-states. You'll analyze the reading about humanism. You'll complete the processing activity, and then you're going to complete this after the 17th of April. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Whenever I assign you a module, I will give you a time goal, what I'm highlighting right here. It should take you about 45 minutes to complete this. I don't want you to spend hours on social studies. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's other things going on. I want you to be able to, spend your days, especially when it's beautiful outside like it is today, not spending hours on social studies. So 45 minutes shouldn't take you more than that. If you find yourself working and you're at the 45-minute mark, you could, of course, stop working at that point in time and then just kind of submit whatever you have. As we are moving on here, you have this Renaissance mapping activity. You're going to go to the TCI textbook, and it is going to be under the lesson Europe's Renaissance and Reformation and under setting the stage. Here they talk about the physical features of Europe. They show you a map of Europe around 1500. And then here's the map right here. And I like that it's interactive and it's digital. And then there are just a couple things they ask you to locate and to answer some questions. So that's your mapping activity for the Renaissance. So you'll complete that. The next page in this module talks about the influence of Italian city-states. and there's just a little reading there for you. And then I have an optional video about how did Venice become a trade empire. So if you want to learn more about that, again, it's optional, but read over city-states in that part there. What is humanism? Humanism is something that emerges during the Renaissance, and it kind of drives a lot of the advancements and learning of this time period. So read over what humanism is on that page. Then you have your processing activity. And the processing activity is based on this image here. It's very similar to the one I showed you at the start of our PowerPoint. It says complete the processing activity for the Renaissance introduction. Respond to the prompt on the discussion board with a well thought out paragraph. Paragraph should be 5 sentences in length. And you're going to click on this link here, and it's going to take you to this discussion. It says, describe what the image above shows about changes in European life at the end of the Middle Ages that led to the flowering of arts and learning called the Renaissance. Include 3 of the following words: trade, banking, city-states, classical, and humanism. So that is your module for this first week of distance learning. If you have any questions, you can, of course, email me, bblair@cbst.org. I hope you're all doing well with distance learning, and I will see you next Thursday for our live Teams call. Take care, everyone.